Hi everyone, this is Glenn with Vegas Backyard Prepper, and today we're going to be pressure canning green beans. Okay, so today we're going to be pressure canning our green beans from our garden. We harvested all our green beans throughout the season, put them into gallon baggies and froze them till we were ready to do it all in one big batch. Connor, if you could hand me one of the baggies so I can show them. So the boys this morning cut all of our green beans up, and after doing that, we ended up with 4 full 1 gallon baggies of green beans. So we're probably going to have to do a couple runs of pressure canning our green beans. So now with green beans, you have to pressure can them. They're non-acidic. So this is our Presto pressure canner. It's a dial gauge canner. It's not a weight gauge, which means it has a dial right here that tells you the amount of pressure on the inside. Now, each time you use it, you need to make sure your vent hole here is completely clear and clean, as well as make sure there's nothing clogging your gauge. When you're ready to can, you put a little tiny thin layer of cooking oil on the seal. That helps make sure that you get a good seal on your canner. You're going to need some basic tools as well. You're going to need a funnel. You're going to need your jar lifter. What this is when the jars are in there and they're hot, you just reach in, grab the jar, pick it up, and put it on your cooling mat. And then this right here is your jar. I call it the jar tool. I don't remember the exact name for it. But you use this down inside the jar to get all the air bubbles out of the food, as well as it has a little gauge here to determine the headspace. What the headspace is on the jar. It tells you how deep, with the distance from the top of the jar down to the level of the food. And I'll show you how to use that here in a little bit as well. The last thing you're going to need are your jars. You need to sterilize your jars. The best way to do it is to put them into a stock pot or something, completely cover them with water, fill them and cover them with water, and bring it to a boil. Do not let the jars sit directly on the bottom of the pot, though. You need to put like a steamer rack or something on the bottom to keep them from touching the bottom of the pot. Otherwise, they will shatter. Once they're sterilized, I actually wiped down my sink with a little bit of bleach, rinsed it, and the jars are in the sink now in hot water to keep them up at temperature till I'm ready to fill them. You also need to do the same thing with your lids, and my lids are in a bowl of hot water. That way then they stay nice and hot and stay clean. One other thing with your pressure canner, especially if you live in an area like us that has hard water, I put a little bit of vinegar in the water, about a tablespoon or two, just to keep any hard water residue off of your jars while you're doing the pressure canning. So one thing you want to make sure you do is you become familiar with your pressure canner before you go to use it. Read your instruction manual. Each brand is a little bit different. Become familiar with it and take it slow. You don't want to miss any steps. So our pressure canner here, the Presto, has little marks in it. That tells us how full to fill it. And it only fills up to about right here on the inside. And that creates this, because it's the steam and the pressure that brings everything up to heat. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get our jars packed up and we'll start the process. Okay, so we're filling our jars up. I've got them in the sink right here in the hot water. I just pulled this one out. With the jar lifter, all you do is you go like that, pick it up. That way it keeps you from having to touch a hot jar. So the recipes I get are out of the Ball their canning book. And according to the recipe, I think I want to put this stuff into a different container because this little bag on the Mrs. Wages is a pain in the butt. So for our recipe, you want 1 teaspoon. Which my little thing here, this side is teaspoon, this side is tablespoon. So we want 1 teaspoon per quart. And then we're going to take our funnel and we're going to pack the green beans in. Now the reason why you use this funnel here is it keeps any food from touching the lip of the jar. So we just fill it up here. And one thing I do is this right here is used, especially when you're making like anything fermented, like sauerkraut. It just fits right down. Let's see, is this one fit? Nope. It fits right down in, and I just do a very gentle kind of push down, just to kind of make sure I use all the available space. You don't want to overfill your jars though, so as you get closer to the top, just go a little bit at a time. That looks about good. And then I'll use this to kind of pack it down. Now, we're going to add our liquid. Let's see, where's my label? And for this, you want to use your funnel as well. So we're just going to take a little bit. Let me find my label. There it is. So we take our ladle and we fill our jar. Now, this is where that term headspace comes into play. Headspace is the amount of air at the top of the jar. So, get our little jar tool here, and what we're going to do is we come in and just kind of Make sure we get all the air bubbles out. Then we use this end, and we need 1-inch headspace. Okay, so we need a little more water because it's not quite touching. Let's see here. Tiny bit more. And there we go. That's 1 inch. Now, most important step. You want to use either like a clean paper towel or a clean rag. Since we're just dealing with water. You can just give it a quick little wipe off. Take your jar lid, set it down on top, and then your ring, thread it on. You only want to go finger tight. You don't want to crank down on it. If you crank down too tight, it can create a false seal, or it may not seal at all. So just finger tight. I'm going to set this back in the hot water until I'm ready to load. Now I'm going to go ahead and do that for each of the remaining jars. And once we're done, we'll get them loaded into the canner. Okay, so I got all of my jars filled and ready to go. Now we need to get them into our canner. Now you want to preheat your canner, get the water inside up to temperature. That's why you got to keep your jars hot. That's why I had them in the hot water. So one by one, we're going to put our jars in the canner. You want to make sure they're not touching the sides, so just a little bit off the side. And you also want to make sure that they're not like touching right up against each other. That way then the water inside can circulate freely in between them. Now the pressure canner I have will hold 7 quart jars per batch. And we still got a whole bunch of green beans left to can, so we're going to have to do this in 2 batches. Alrighty. So they are all in the pressure canner. Now, take your lid, make sure that you've got your seal in. You know, like I said before, you got to make sure that your vent is clear, all the holes are clear on your vent. Make sure there's no obstructions on your dial. And every year you need to get your dial checked. I take mine, the Ace Hardware, one of the Ace Hardwares here in town can actually do testing on these dials. So I take it there and get it checked. But, you know, wherever you're at, whatever, you know, local hardware or farm store should have something where you can get your dial tested. So we line up the lid. There we go. Oh, come on. Oh, silly me. I've got this spun. There we go. On the inside of your pot, there's also on the pressure canner going to be a little piece like that. Put that in the back. There we go. Put your lid on, and this one is just a twist to lock. Now, what you want to do is you want to take your temperature now all the way up. You want to get it nice and hot and watch the steam coming out of your valve. You want it to get to where the steam is a straight, constant flow, because you're trying to force all the air, all the regular air out of the pressure cooker and have it just be the steam. So you take this up, get it to where the steam is coming out completely, and then you give it about 5 minutes letting it do that. Once you do that, then you take your weight and you'll set it on like that. That way then it keeps the steam in, keeps the pressure in, and that's when you start watching your valve. Here in Las Vegas, we're at about 2,700 feet above sea level. So according to the, I believe, the Department of Agriculture, we'll want to pressure can this at least 12 psi. Now, I know it's going to be hard to try to keep it right at that number, having to modulate the stove and everything. But as long as you keep it between 12 and 15, you should be good. However, you do not want to let it drop below the recommended pressure for your elevation. If it does, you got to bring it back up to your pressure and start your time over. Now, once this gets up to pressure, we start the timer and it'll be 25 minutes. Once it's done, then once that 25-minute period is done with it processing at pressure, turn the heat off and let it drop back down to 0 pressure on its own. Don't open it, don't remove your weight, don't touch it. If you take your weight off right when it's done and it rapidly decompresses, you run the risk of shattering your jars, having the food inside that's really hot of each jar busting through the lid. A lot of bad things. So leave your weight on and just let it drop on its own. So once it comes up to pressure, we'll come back and I'll show you what that looks like, and we'll get the weight on it. Or actually, what we're going to do is when it gets to where it has the steam coming out, I'll see if I can catch that on camera to show you what I mean by that. We'll put the weight on, and then after that, we'll cut back and once it gets up to pressure. Okay, so we've got it going to where the steam is coming out. Probably should be able to see it on the camera there. Yep, there it is. Now you want to let it keep going like this until it's a constant stream. That way it forces all the regular air out and it's nothing but steam on the inside. And so we'll let it get to that point. I'll put the weight on and we'll let it build up the pressure, and I'll show you that once we get there. See, the pressure is already starting to build in it. Yeah, it gets to be a good amount of steam, so just got to keep an eye on it. Now while it's doing this, there's probably going to be a little bit of water dribbling out. That's normal. But like I said, you just got to keep an eye on it. Once it's a constant stream of steam, then you start your 5-minute countdown. Okay, so it looks like our pressure is at 13 psi. So I'm going to back the heat off just a hair and keep an eye on it. And now we're going to set the time I'm going to set it for like 27 minutes just to be on the safe side. And once it's done, we'll turn the heat off and let it cycle down and depressurize on its own. We're not going to take the weight off. We're not going to try to open it, nothing like that. Don't try to do that. If you do that, you're going to get horrible steam burns. So we'll be back in 25 minutes and then we'll cut away and then we'll come back and show it when it's time to open this up. Now, one thing though is over here, I have the second round ready to go in the jars in hot water. So we're doing 2 batches. We got a total of 13 quart jars of green beans from our harvest. And with me and my wife and 7 kids, we usually use 2 jars per meal. So, it's right there. That's 6 meals, which doesn't seem like much, but, we're on a small, not even a quarter acre lot. So our growing space is limited, but it helps out because that's 6 meals now that we don't have to buy. And we're going to be probably putting in a few more raised beds. So we'll take a look and see what we got and what we can work with in the space. So we'll be back when this is done. Okay, so it looks like our timer is just about done. We'll give it just a few more seconds here until it goes off. Then what we're going to do is we're just going to turn off the stove, turn off the burner, and let it depressurize on its own. That way then, once it's fully depressurized and completely down to 0, there's a little pressure thing in the back here. That'll drop down. Then we can pick up our weight. We'll let it normalize for about 15-20 minutes. And then once that's done, we'll come back. Oh, there it is right there. So we turn off the burner, and now begins the process of just letting the pressure cooker cool down on its own and depressurize. It's got to go all the way back down to 0. This has got to drop in, and then we can take the weight off. That way then all the remaining steam inside can come out, and then it will be ready for us to open after about 15 minutes. Alrighty, so pressure normalized all the way down to 0. I took the weight off and let it normalize inside. You still have to be careful. It's still going to be hot. So we're going to very gently twist to open it. And never open up towards you. Always open away so the steam goes away from you. Okay. So now we just pull the jars out and set them on our cooling rack. Very gently. Now, as these cool, you're going to hear a little pop, or all that is the lid sealing. It's perfectly fine, perfectly normal. Let them cool overnight, at least 10 to 12 hours. And then you can write your dates on the top. Make sure you write the date, so that way then you can rotate in your pantry. So I've got these 7 here that are done. And now these 6 are going to be going in for that round. So that'll be our 13 quart jars. And I'll post a picture of all of them when they're done on our Facebook and Instagram. If you go to the banner on our main page on the channel, we should have the links up at the top or in the About section. Just go to our About section on the YouTube page, and down at the bottom you'll see the link for our Instagram and Facebook. So that's it. Highly recommend getting the Ball Book of Food Preservation. Got a lot of good information. And make sure you subscribe to our channel. You know, like I said before in other videos, we're a small channel. We don't have a staff. We don't have production designers or anything like that. We're just a big family trying to do the best we can with what we've got. You know, most of the time it's either my wife or one of my sons operating the camera. You know, we don't have graphic artists and computer designers or anything like that. So please subscribe to our channel, share it with your friends, help our channel grow. And that's going to be it today for Vegas Backyard Prepper.